Casual Magic has been brought to you by Cool Stuff Inc., where you can get cool stuff. Use the code CASUAL for 5% off your order. We're also sponsored by Quiver Time, makers of the Quiver and Bolt deck cases and other fine card-holding accessories. Use the code CASUAL on their site for 10% off your purchase. And by Architect, a deck hosting website that doesn't sell anything, but they like me and I like them, so kindly use them for all your deck list needs. Now, on to the show. Hello and welcome to Casual Magic, the show where we talk about the fun side of Magic the Gathering. My name is Shivan Butt, and Casual Magic is brought to you by Quiver Time, Cool Stuff Inc., and Architect. Today is my 200th episode, and I'm very, very grateful to all of you who have come along this ride for the past 3 years with me. And today I'm super excited because I've got one of my all-time favorite players to come on as my guest for number 200. It's hella sweet. You all know him as, one of the greatest players of all time. Luis Scott-Vargas, LSV himself. Man, I'm super stoked. Thank you so much for joining me today, man.
Yeah, thanks for the invite. I know scheduling has been difficult. You've been after me for a bit, and I'm glad I could make it.
Yeah, I appreciate it. I mean, I know we're both parents and we have actual lives that we have to deal with, and sometimes it's hard to carve out time for these sort of things. It's just like I've been following your career for as long as I've been paying attention to people having careers in Magic. So, like your Elves deck is one of my favorite decks of all time, like the extended Elves deck that you went 16-0 with or whatever.
Those were two different decks, actually. The Elves deck was what I won the Pro Tour with. The kind of like Naya aggro deck was what I went 16-0 with in San Diego.
Fair. I accept the correction. That Elves deck, though, was awesome. I loved it because as an Elves player, it's always nice to see my deck not be second tier for once. And that was like a good era for Elves, too. The thing, though, is that like it blew my mind to discover that you and I basically both went to the same college at the same time, but I was too busy playing things like Magi Nation and like Legend of the Five Rings because I was in my like Magic is bad for me phase. And meanwhile, you and like Paul Cheon are sitting there learning how to become the greatest master of all time. It's like, well, I could have been on that train.
What years were you at Davis for? I assume UC Davis is what you're talking about.
Yeah, I was at Davis from 99 to 04.
Okay, so we overlapped. I started in 2001, so we certainly overlapped there.
Yeah. Do you remember what store you used to play at?
End Zone. That was the store I'd always go to. Yeah,
that was a cool place. Yeah, because the other shop in town had a very cantankerous owner, let's say. And
yeah, no, I well aware. I remember both the owner and the shop.
Yeah, it's a good time. So I don't want to like go over your history and everything again because like you've done this on many podcasts and everything like that. What I'm more interested in is you've been at the top of the game for a very long time. You've gotten basically everything, I think, short of like a world championship. What keeps you motivated? Why do you still play?
Well, there's like a couple different threads there. One is that, yes, in terms of competitive Magic, there's not really anything I feel like I have left to prove. There are some things that I wish I had accomplished. Yes, yeah. I wouldn't have minded, winning worlds. Like that's one of my like bucket list items or whatever. But when it comes to competitive Magic, yeah, I'm not trying to accomplish anything specific there. Besides, I just like to compete. But part of it is so much of what I've done for Magic in Magic involves making content. And I mean, I think obviously what that's like.
Yeah.
Where a lot of what I do is make stuff that people enjoy, whether it's, limited resources, like the podcast every week or, content written for Channel Fireball or YouTube videos, whatever it is. I like creating those things. And that's a lot of what drives me, which is good because if competitive Magic drove me, then, well, I'd be in a rougher spot right now because the opportunities for competitive play have certainly gone down quite a bit over the years.
Yeah, that's true. I remember there used to be a time when there were multiple GPs every weekend, a pro tour on the clock every season, and you could just always be somewhere playing. I'm actually one thing I'm curious about, like, because you've been like on the real grinder life and you've gone to all these things. Did you never feel like just exhausted having to travel all the time or having to think like because playing a magic game, playing a magic tournament is 13 hours of just pure thinking and having to be focused on top of it. And travel sucks. Like travel is very harmful on our bodies. It's very difficult to do and adjust to. Like I don't get how you were able to go weekend to weekend to weekend like that. Like was it just youthful drive?
I honestly, like, I couldn't really tell you myself because I had stopped doing that many years before,
Mm.
like, the recent set of pro changes, or even just before like 2018. I think the last year where I really felt like just went to everything was in like 2013. This is a long time ago.
Oh, that is a long time ago.
I mean, there's different levels of staying connected, right? Like there's
Mm.
playing all the pro tours and going to the Grand Prix that suited me, which is kind of where I was at when eventually Grand Prix kind of stopped existing.
Right.
Uh, there is, like you said, going to like everything, which is what I did, and ended up. I actually did burn myself out. I did stop doing that for some time just because it was too many events. There was years where there was 30. There's something like 30 Grand Prix in a year, and I
That's
went to
crazy.
I think I went to like 20 of them plus the pro tours. Like I was traveling a lot, and this is obviously before I had any kids. So
Yeah.
that by itself would have ended that. But even
Right.
before then, I was already like, okay, this is too much.
Yeah, that just seemed like I just think about the grinder life that some people were leading, and I'm like, I don't know how you're how where do you live? You live in an airport lounge, man. Like, what are you paying rent
Well,
for?
the part that was crazy is I was working full time at Direwolf Game Studio here in Denver.
Yeah,
So I what every Friday I would like leave, get on a flight, go fly somewhere, play in a Grand Prix, fly back Sunday night, and go to work on Monday. And I
that's
honestly
insane.
I don't know how I did it. Looking back, it's like 28-year-old me was just had
What?
lost his mind. I guess I really wanted to compete that much.
I'm just thinking about that right now. That first off, that's hella expensive, but beyond that, it's just like, oh my god, getting on a plane every single Friday and then going back to work is just crazy. Like,
Yeah, way too much.
yeah, that's um yeah, God, that's just unhealthy, man. I don't know how some of these pro players did it back in the day, let alone now. Let alone the folks from Japan who would show up in Kansas City on
There's
a
a
random
stat
weekend.
at one point in like something 2017, 2018. Shuhei Nakamura,
Yeah,
fellow Hall of Famer, who's actually on my team for a long time, had gone to 38% of all Grand Prix that had ever been held.
that's insane.
I
Because
just unbelievable. Like, how do you do that?
I'm just thinking, like, you live in Japan. What are you doing in Topeka or in St. Louis or in Berlin or whatever the hell? It's Magic being a global game is rad. However, the travel for tournaments, it makes someone like PV look even more like a crazy champion because he's like living at the bottom of the world and having to travel to all these GPs and pro tours is just unbelievable to me.
Yeah, I mean, the challenges that the foreign players faced were certainly very high, and it's always impressive to see kind of how well they did despite that.
Yeah. So one of the things that like I watch you every day play cubes, and I
Right.
love the fact that you started your own channel. It's got that cool little logo that looks like a coffee cup. That's very cute.
Apparently, looks a little like the Java logo, which I didn't realize at the time. But
Yeah, I mean, you have to be a level of nerd to get there, but I was just like, "Ah, that's cute. I like that." Um, and I love cubing, and you've definitely like watching you cube has made me want to cube a lot more, which is I think great and lovely. However, you teach us a lot of bad habits, man. Like watching you cube is like, oh yeah, I can draft a storm deck. It'll be awesome. And then you end up with a pile of unplayable cards that don't you have no idea how to sequence. But you've somehow got a magical ability to make like all these random like rituals and stuff actually do something. Um, so thanks for cubing all day, but please stop leading us down terrible directions.
yeah, I will accept some amount of blame for that. It's a very do as I say, not as I do sort of situation.
The thing though is that like obviously I've watched a lot of magic content and I've watched everybody who's doing all this stuff. And the talent that you have that I think so few other magic pros have is somehow you can play a perfect game of magic and still talk. It is very hard to talk while playing magic, let alone, commentate over yourself, explain what you're doing, spell it out in a way that let someone like me actually follow along. And that's like one of the greatest talents I think you personally possess. And like, how did this is weird. Like, I don't like having interview style things. I like having conversations, but this is a question I've just been burning me. I don't know how you do it. How do you manage to talk through a magic game and not just lose track of what you're doing?
I mean, it honestly, like, it stems a little from, I think, one of my, maybe bad habits or negative qualities, which is that I have a hard time not having, like, a million things happening at once. Uh, when I actually speaking of Chian, when I lived with him, he would always make fun of me because, I would be, playing Magic Online, but also watching a TV show and it's like, and that I don't think that's actually, like, great for you. In fact, a lot of people who, have done, like, studies on, multitasking are like, "Well, it actually does hurt your ability to do these things." Like, it's not good that you're doing that, but that's just kind of always how I have been, and as a result, I do end up in a spot where being able to play Magic and talk at the same time is kinda comes naturally to me. It's something I've done a lot of, like you mentioned, and I guess, got used to it.
Well, I mean, because like I see someone like Reed Duke, who's like one of my favorite players, and I love watching him. But sometimes Reed will go into the tank for like 5 minutes on his videos, and it's just like silence. And I'm like, "Did you fall asleep? Am I falling asleep? What's happening here?" And it's hard to be both entertaining and good at Magic at the same time. Like I've tried to play Magic on stream and commentate over myself, and I'm like, "This is bad. I am bad at this, and this is ending poorly." Um, but even
I
like
mean,
just
it's hard to
comment,
play Magic to begin with. I mean, it's just
yeah,
a very hard game. So,
yeah.
much less any of the other things. It's both of those things are actually hard. It's hard both to play Magic and to kind of put together, like, commentary that makes sense. So,
Right.
yeah, it's not surprising that, people who are great at one aren't necessarily great at the other, and certainly not doing both. By the way, I wouldn't say that I play perfect Magic while talking about it, because
Yeah,
I
you
certainly
play
don't.
good enough. You
I play
play
pretty good Magic.
you can make it fun though, right? Like that's the point. So, um, man, like I had a million questions for you, stemming from the fact that like, so you've been on limited resources now for almost 10 years, which is wild to me.
I
Uh,
mean, wild to me and Marshall too. I always think of myself as, like,
like the new guy.
the new host, but I've actually bypassed that or passed that over quite a long time
I
ago at
think
this
you've
point.
longer than all three combined at this point.
Yeah, I have. There was a while where I was that, but that is no longer the case.
Well, because I remember the first episode you showed up on was the Fate Reforged set review, and that was like a 5.5 hour long show. Like, I'm glad that you guys don't do that anymore, but I just remember that one uniquely because I was taking off from San Francisco to go to Hawaii, and I was able to listen to the entire show on the plane ride from door to door without, like, having it run out of show, and I'm like, now as a dude who's been doing podcasting for, like, 3, 4 years now, the idea of doing a 5.5 hour podcast just makes me wanna cry. Like, why would I ever do that to myself?
Well,
So
no, it doesn't really make sense. I will admit that.
yeah, I think the format that you guys have now is much better, and, I genuinely appreciate like, I love set review well, I love your set reviews because you and Marshall have a very good, like, rapport, and you also have a very balanced outlook, and, that leads me to where I wanted to go, which is one of the questions that I know a lot of play people because I was like, "I'm gonna talk to LSV, what do you want me to ask?" And they're like, "How does he look at a pile of cards and figure out what's good or not?" Like, how do you do that? Just taking an ambient pile of cards that we've got here and figure out like, oh, like this is or even like if you were to take a cube you've never seen before and somebody just hand you a pack of 15, how do you know what's worth taking?
So, a lot of it is actually it involves one of my favorite things in the world to talk about, which is heuristics.
Mm,
I love heuristics, which for those who haven't heard the word, it's something you use every single day of your life, which is kind of like a rule of thumb is the best way to describe it, where you've kind of learned these patterns in your life, whether it has to do with magic or not, of,
mm,
you know, as simple as, like, when it's raining, bring an umbrella, or when it's cloudy in the morning, you should bring an umbrella, even because it might be raining.
mm,
Like, and so when I look at the common one in a red deal three, like, I just know that card is good. It's always been good. It will always be good.
mm,
So you're able to kind of shortcut in a lot of ways because, look, Magic's great. There's, like, an infinite well of possibilities, but they do, of course, repeat a bunch
yeah.
of cards, right? I mean, they have to. Like, that's just how
25,000 cards, you can't all be unique.
right, exactly. So given that, I think that most of the cards that you encounter in a given set, you're going to have some experience with. And
Mm,
because of that, you're able to then look at the kind of like the cards that don't, and you do have to analyze those. And that's not always the easiest, but you, you should be able to put together a lot of the cards that you see and able to like kind of have a good set grasp of where they fit. That being said, limited set reviews are like kind of famous for not getting things right on the first try. And I wouldn't say that I do either.
You
Like
guys
there's plenty of
famously
cards
thought
we miss
Ugin
on.
was unplayable.
Yeah, right. That's one that you remember 10 years later because
Yeah.
it was such a bad miss.
I mean, because one of the things that's wild is like, yeah, it's fair to figure out like, okay, a 2-2 for 2, sure, I can play it at some point in the curve or whatever. But sometimes you look at these set mechanics and trying to like figure out how all these things interconnect or which like if it's going to be good or not. That's like the skill that separates someone like you from me, which is but I mean, you kind of have to make an educated guess, right? Like at the beginning of a set review, looking and saying like these cards look like they should work together. Until you actually play it, you don't know, right? Is that kind of how it goes?
Yeah, I mean, it is some degree like that where it's like you look at like a, a good way to look at it is something like Birthday Escape from the
Mm,
Lord of the Rings set, right? One,
right.
one blue mana sorcery, draw a card, and be tempted by the ring. And it's like, well, I don't know exactly how this is going to shake out, but I do know that this is the set mechanic, and one mana cantrips historically are extremely powerful, and especially one that has the set mechanic on it. Yeah, this card's probably pretty good. Ended up being the best blue common,
Became
which
amazing.
isn't exactly what I would have predicted, but certainly we thought the card looked good, and it was.
Yeah.
So
Boy,
you
Tempted by the Ring was a mechanic that was I hope they don't do stuff like that again. It was neat, but it was very tedious after a while.
Yeah, I one of my, one of the places where I think I differ from a lot of the folk working on Magic right now is I feel like they trend on the side of being too complex. And I mean,
Yeah.
you were looking at Caverns of Ixalan preview cards today, and some of those
Yeah.
cards are just like not readable, like that green
No.
white 3/4, which doesn't even have like that ridiculous of an actual ability. It basically buffs your creatures equal to the
Yeah.
amount of buffs they have.
Yeah.
But the way they had to write it out, or maybe not the way they have to write it out, the way they have written it out, it's just
So
not that good,
it is people were like, "How are you having any confusion about this at all?" And I'm like, "Bro, this card is written in the most like recursive way that's just like self-referential. You don't understand whether it's targeting one creature or multiple creatures. And it's like realistically, the ability is very simple. Take all the buffs you have and double them as counters or something. And it's a cool card once you figure it out. But like I've been looking at like part of my job is obviously looking at cards for Commander and looking at all the Commander decks come out. Between Woe, Doctor Who, Ixalan, and like, just these sets have come out. These things are all just encyclopedias of text that are not at all simple or easy to parse. And like the Doctor Who decks are some of the most complex decks they've ever put out as precons because they're just like 400 triggers and there's 35 counters and everything triggers off of other things. And it's just like, who are you aiming at anymore? Like, we can't all be just internal WotC people playing. I've got to be able to give this to a new person and let them learn how to play at some point. But it's just becoming like my son wanted to play the unset that had come out on Infinity
right.
because he was like, I like clowns and spaceships and circuses and things. Let's go. And I'm like, cool. Let's open some decks and let's try to do it. And like halfway through it, he started crying and he's like, Papa, I can't understand any of these cards. There's just too many words on them. And I'm like, look, you're in second, third grade. This is obviously going to be complicated. But like, I can give him a pack of alpha cards and he knows how to figure out like, ooh, mountain walk. That means I can go through mountains or something. I think you're right that Magic is just like got a bit of a problem of over complexity for the sake of being cute almost.
Yeah, I don't. Well, to be fair
Maybe not
to the
cute, but it's just like it's so
yeah, I was gonna say to be fair to the Magic designers, it's not for the sake of being cute. Part of it is they have to make so many cards, and that's like a whole other thing,
yeah,
by the way.
too many cards.
But
Yeah.
that's for better or for worse, mostly for worse. That's kind of like when a lot of your metrics are like how many cards can I sell, then yeah, you're going to make a lot of cards. But
Yeah, sure are. Oh man.
but even so, even with having to make a lot more cards, it does feel like they are some of the cards just like I don't know, like Saruman of Many Colors is one I've been on a soapbox about from Lord of the Rings, and like I don't actually know a single person who like read the card and understand what it does on first read.
it was my promo for the pre-release, and I looked at it and I'm like, "I am not playing this. Whatever it is, I'm just don't care." Like, I'm gonna go to Frodo and never look at this card again. Yeah, no, it's just so the thing is, like, they have to write for the purpose of rules, for rules texting, but some of these cards just end up being like that stupid card from the old days, which is like, pick 2 cards which don't share the same color or something like
Dead
that.
Ringers, yep.
Yeah, and it's like, I feel like the amount of English majors in that building, somebody should be able to make a card that teaches you that is, like, clearly readable within your text box. Um, you were a card designer and a game designer for a long time in, like, Direwolf and other places. Um, have you ever thought about working at Wate?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know too many Magic players who haven't, especially
That's
ones
true.
who've worked on game design. It hasn't worked out, like, to I haven't it hasn't been a something that really was realistic for me most of the time, so I haven't really pursued it.
Fair.
It's just hard when, I don't know, like, was the owner of Channel Fireball for a long time, one of the owners, and, like, that was something that wasn't really compatible with working at WotC, and that was
Yeah,
something that I
fair.
wasn't really willing to budge on, um, just because that was something really important to me, and Channel Fireball still matters a lot to me, but, given that actually TCG Player did acquire us, that
And
actually no
then
longer
eBay
is a
bought
constraint.
TCG Player.
Yeah, a little there's a little chain of dominoes there, which none of which I really knew about until it all happened. I was pretty far removed from that side of things, so I was more of a spectator, like, being told, "Oh, this is happening." I'm like, "All right, cool." But, yeah, I mean, working on Magic would be a lot of fun. I do think that, like, it's easy to talk about what you do, when it comes to Magic, even if, when you don't have skin in the game, as it were.
Yeah,
But,
fair. Well, I mean, the reason I ask is because has your experience working in game design given you a different approach, like a different understanding of the way like magic comes out? Because I know, like, I work in a very big e-commerce company doing a lot of like merchandising stuff, so I have to pay attention to like shipment and buying and selling and like how much are my competitors charging and the all the business side of things, which has given me a little bit more sympathy towards like Wizards' like baseline needs of finance and stuff. But, like, you've had to make cards and sell them. It's like, you probably understand better than I do even what these guys have to deal with.
yeah, I mean, working on games is challenging. Like, game design is like, one of the ways I've described it to people who are curious about it is you're trying to solve a lot of puzzles and you don't really even get an answer to many times whether you solve them correctly. You don't know. Like, you don't know if it's better to ship a card with a 3 in the cost or a 4 in the cost, or put the draft button on the left side or the right side or whatever. Like, there's a lot of different decisions that you don't really find out whether you made them correctly ever. Like, some you can track, and some, are pretty clear. Like, especially since I've worked, pretty much exclusively on digital games. I've worked on some board games too. Those are a little different.
Sure.
But when you work on a digital game, you can actually just alpha beta
Yeah.
test things where you're like, we're going to try this, and we're going to try this, and we're going to see what gets more engagement, or what makes people click more, or play more, or what have you.
Yeah. That is definitely like doing A/B. I mean, I hate it when like Arena will flip which side of the trigger is the one that does the mechanic versus the one that just cast it straight. And like they've done that like twice now, and it just breaks your muscle memory and makes
Oh yeah,
customers very unhappy.
it's rough when when that happens.
Yeah. And then, like, of course, the fact that, like, our 2 choices are playing Arena or MitGo, which is, like, the most miserable I mean, I love Ryan Spain, I think they're doing a great job, but god, that interface is the least friendly interface you could possibly imagine for Magic, short of cockatrice.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I don't agree. I played a lot of Magic Online, so I know I'm a little
Yeah,
biased in that sense. But I prefer to play on Magic Online over Arena whenever games get complicated. For simpler games of Magic, Arena is totally great and it's very smooth. But for more complicated ones, I think Magic Online handles it a lot better.
that's true. The underlying rules engine there at least understand what's going on most of the time. Um, how did you come to own Channel Fireball?
Well, I didn't. I guess
Or a
I
chunk
didn't
of?
buy it. I started it. I
Yeah.
was one of the founders. So
Oh, well, I guess that would do it.
yeah,
Like,
myself, John Sasso, and Mashi Scanlon were kind of like the three founders. Though a lot of it came from John's dad, actually, Gary Sasso, the Gare is what we called him, who owned the original Superstars of Sports back in Cupertino. Which,
I remember
funnily
that
enough,
store.
I used to go to as like a teenager, or in my early 20s, and play Magic there and like trade for cards there and stuff like that. I actually got some of my first Moxes from John Sasso, trading him a stack of cards for Moxes.
That's awesome.
And then, like, many years later, we actually ended up going into business together, which was pretty cool.
Like, that's I mean, that's really cool because like, Channel Fireball ended up being so groundbreaking for so many reasons with content, with getting, like, the actual, like, streaming. You guys were, like, some of the first people to ever do Magic streaming, were you?
Yeah, the videos, the draft videos we did, we weren't like the literal first. Like, people were
Yeah.
making these things, but we were, I think, one of the first websites to really go hard at doing this, and posting draft videos, and that actually ended up working out really well for us. Like, just first mover advantage goes a long way, and
Yeah.
we were able to kind of capitalize on that. It
Ye
was pretty cool.
Yeah, I mean, I always thought it was cool. I mean, I definitely remember going to Superstars as a kid, because I grew up in San Jose, so it's like I definitely knew all these South Bay stores, and I ended up working right like, as an adult, I worked really close to the Channel Fireball, game center in Santa Clara for a while there, so that was really cool to go to too. Um, it's just neat to go and, like, oh, well, one of the weird side effects of that is that all the Bay Area players are people who want to try to practice to get good enough to be able to be a grinder at Channel Fireball, which means that they're kicking your ass at F&Ms in the random other stores in the area. But that's just the price we pay to live in proximity to greatness, I guess. Um, God, man, it's like it's weird because like I'm sitting there, I'm like, I'm talking to LSV. What should I talk about? And the only thing I can think about is the Eldrazi Winter Pro Tour, where you sat down in like the top eight and had two of those. You played the Eye of Ugin, and then you had the two like Eldrazi in your hand that were like cost two or less, the Matter Reshapers or whatever, and you just dropped them like both. Like your turn one, Eye of Ugin, flop down the cards. Geez, and the other person's like, oh,
Yeah,
that
Eldrazi Mimic
yeah,
was the card.
Eldrazi
It was
Mimic,
the
and I'm
the
like,
two
dude,
one that whenever you play an Eldrazi, I think it was maybe just colorless creature. Now I don't remember.
yeah.
It becomes you can turn it into those stats, which
It
was
was
which was
so funny.
was
That
sick.
card was so that season was so weird. Like, just the idea of, like, everybody playing Mega Eldrazi decks, and you made hell of a run there during that, top 8 too. But it was so much fun to watch, like, just you have this style when you play, which is just really, like, almost campy and over the top in a fun way. Like, sometimes Magic players get a little serious, but I do enjoy that you remember that this is still a fun game to play.
Well, I mean, kind of going back to the fact that I like doing multiple things at once. It doesn't really distract me to be
Goofy.
to just kind of be goofy and like play around with like just what's going on. And I actually find this to be very funny. So I don't have any background in like theater or anything like that,
Mm,
but I have found out there's this interesting phenomenon that I kind of noticed, which is when you're in a feature match, right,
mm,
for coverage, you have this canvas to work with, and you know that there's people watching you live, right, the whole Twitch audience, and they can't hear what you say because you're usually not mic'd up, but
yeah.
they can see the cards you play, and sometimes they can see you, and I find that to be a very funny place to do things like play lands in front, or to uh, throw a gut shot on the table when I top decked it against Frank Lepore. I view that as an opportunity for me to kind of perform for that
I
audience,
love it.
to
It's so
make
much
Magic more
fun.
interesting, because everyone is so goddamn serious when they play.
Right?
Which,
Jesus Christ.
look,
Have
I totally
fun,
get.
please.
This really isn't me bashing people who are serious, because I know playing a match in the top eight or for a top eight, or you're 7-0 and you get a feature match, especially if you don't normally get feature matches, right? You're like,
Tense
local
and
player won the
stressed.
PTQ on a 7-0 run. Now I'm getting paired against Gabriel Nassif in the feature match. Of course, you're going to be serious. And also, Gabriel Nassif's going to be serious. He also doesn't really mess around much. Though actually, he's got a flair for showmanship. Most
Yeah.
players don't. I get it. And you want to focus on the match and be serious. It's kind of like the old someone just won the pro tour and you can see them sideboarding, right? And it's like, yes, on the one hand, that is the sort of thing where it would be cool if there was a little more kind of
Like
panache,
celebration,
a little
jumping up
more
and down,
flair.
something.
But And it's really no one's responsibility to do that. I don't think it's my responsibility. I just think it's more fun. I personally am satisfied by it, and I think it's more fun for people to watch. I think it is a better experience.
I mean, I agree 100%. I love like w- people love watching you on like perform basically because like you're doing silly tricks that we couldn't get away with because we're not like the time you bluffed out and I mean you have done some very famous bluffs in the history of coverage and they're just silly and fun to watch and really enjoyable in a way that like I mean look I love watching Shota Yasuoka play Magic. He's one of the best players of all time. He's just but when he plays he's just like dead serious like your murder face like Street Fighter guys do and at the same time, it's also really fun to watch somebody just celebrate and have fun and like just do goofy thing. Like I love it because you're friends with all these people you're playing with. So they know who you are. So you can do things that might be a little tenuous if I was to sit down with a stranger and play. But because they're your friends, they're like, oh, what's he up to now? Like, do your friends ever call you out on some of these shenanigans afterwards?
Well, I don't know about if call out
Or
is
just
the right
poke
way,
you?
but I will agree with you that I will do these things more against my friends
Mm,
than a random person because at the end of the day, I don't want my opponents to feel bad about the
right.
match. And I don't want them to feel like like I just played against this, complete jerk or intimidate people because I know that like if you're new to the pro tour and you're playing against me, you might be intimidated, right? Just by that to
Right.
start with. So
Exactly.
I don't want to I don't want to make someone have a bad experience. That said, if I play against Paul Chan, I'm not worried about that, like for many reasons. And so like actually there's a feature match where I played against Chian. This is actually that Eldrazi PT and it's the last round or the first round of day 2. We're both like 7-1 or yeah, I think 7-1 and we're playing in draft and I just was acting like a complete buffoon as he was beating me funnily enough, which actually kind of makes it better in some ways too. And it was a very fun time and it's the sort of thing that I wouldn't do against someone I didn't know.
Yeah, but it's your best friend on the other side of the table. You can go ahead. It's fine. And everybody knows you too. So it's gonna be like Cheon just rolling his eyes.
Yeah, like I was activating creature lands at the end of his turn and like just a bunch of just complete buffoonery. So definitely something that I wouldn't do kind of like at random.
Yeah. Um so what do you think about the fact that the Pro Tour and stuff have come back now? And how do you think Huey is doing with the new state of like competitive play? Because I know I love coming to the Magic Cons and I love going to the Pro Tour side and saying hi to all you guys. And then, going back to like silly side. I like that we can finally coexist in a room together. It's really nice. Um, but what do you think about the events, having played in a bunch of them now?
Well, I really do like the way the Pro Tours feel. I think that that's what Huey and his team. I know
Yeah.
he would certainly remind me that there's a lot of people who work on it, and there is. They really do a great job of making it so it feels like a pro tour. Like I played in a lot of pro tours, and that is definitely a pro tour.
Mm,
So that part is awesome, and I also agree. I do like having it at the Magic Con in part because it's really fun when my friends who aren't qualified at the pro tour are still going because
right.
then you get to hang out with them. Actually, like one of my college roommates went to the Vegas Magic Con, hasn't played in a Magic tournament in 5 years. So
Cool.
there's a lot for a lot of different people, and you get to kind of mix the streams, as it were. Um, there are fewer opportunities for organized play, and I understand why that is, but I am not happy about that. I mean, I think the least favorite, the thing I like least that WotC's ever done, honestly, is make the MPL. Like
That was just, it was so boring.
well, it was a lot of things that were bad, and
Yeah.
the part that personally, and this is just straight up from just my perspective, which by the way, I kind of wish people like understood a little more. There's a lot of people who defend things as being good for the game, and it's like I don't care about what's good for the game. Like I don't care if WotC makes more money. I just don't. Like obviously, I want them to keep printing Magic cards and stay in business. I would,
Right.
in a vacuum, I would certainly want Magic to be more successful rather than less. But when people talk about, well, you might not like this thing, but it's good for the game, and it's like, well, my stakeholder is me, and I like the things that are part of the
Yeah.
game I love, and
Right.
which doesn't take away from other people liking different things. I know Magic is a game for a wide variety of players, and there's a lot of things, like people get to like all the different things that they want. But at the end of the day, the MPL took something I really loved, which was the Pro Tour, and made it and just vanished it. Which also was this like little sleight of hand where it's like it would have been hard to cancel the Pro Tour after a very successful 25-year run, But by turning the Pro Tour into the MPL and then the MPL doing badly, then canceling the MPL, now you have the Pro Tour being canceled.
Ooh, look at that.
And I don't think that was the plan. Obviously, they wanted the MPL to succeed, but there was a lot of things that were just so bad about it that I'm not surprised it didn't.
Yeah, like every part of that was just like I am a deeply invested Magic player, and any given week, I couldn't tell you who was in the NPL or who wasn't in the NPL. I knew the rough general specs of who would make it up there, but like there was no reason for me to want to watch. There was no story. Like it's just random people playing standard during a really boring standard season. On top of that, like part of the joy of watching like Grand Prix or whatever is that I can imagine me being able to go up and say like I could play that and I could totally win and I could aspire to get somewhere. Or seeing like Marshall and BDM put together stories of players who are popping off this weekend and who are having like the time of their life and are maybe the hometown heroes winning the GP, like those are things that mattered and made it fun and made it enjoyable. And the MPL was just like so corporate and so sterile that it just did not feel like Magic was fun anymore. And I'm like, how do you, it takes a lot of work to make Magic look not fun.
Well, that was actually my biggest problem with the MPL was that it it was a fundamental misunderstanding of what Magic fans were, basically.
Mm,
Like, it took Magic from, like you just said, being an aspirational game where, like, I could win a PTQ and play at the Pro Tour, or I could, go play at a Grand Prix, to now there's 32 players. They're the only ones who play at tournaments, and there's no tournaments for everyone else. And especially the people at home, you have no hope of ever being a part of this.
yeah,
And it's like, well, that's not very fun. That sucks. And Magic, they were optimizing for Twitch viewers, which I understand. Like that's the whole esports thing was just like popping off, and Arena was going nuts, and like it's understandable. I'm not saying I would have made better decisions. I'm really not. I'm just saying this wasn't the way to capitalize on Magic, and by making the MPO what it was, it kind of made it so all these Magic players are told now you can watch these players and you can watch, and this is what's going to happen now. But there wasn't really a place for, hey, you get to play Magic, you can be part of this, and that was such a big part of Magic.
right. I mean, like half of the joy is like, oh man, if I win this thing, I might get a trip to Tokyo to play in a pro tour. That's amazing. Instead, it's like, nope, you can play Arena from home and do this thing. But it must have been even worse for like the 33rd best person, right? Like now, what are they going to do? They're
Yeah,
as good as I am.
as someone who was in the you know 50th or something like that at that time, because I had this is back when I had already stopped going to Grand Prix. Yeah, it was like, wow, I don't really have play opportunities anymore. This kind of
Yeah, it's like,
sucks.
if you want to play some Commander, it's like, hey, we're here still. We can give you some spell table access. It'll be great. Um, do you play like? Obviously, you've spent so much time playing pro Magic and playing like 60 card Magic and everything like that. Do you play Magic for fun on your own, like beyond this, or does it work now?
Oh, I play a lot of Magic for fun. It was funny. I had an experience just not that long ago. Whenever the release event for Wilds of Eldraine was, where Wilds of Eldraine was there was like the streamer event where you could, on like that Thursday, you can play get a sneak peek of Wilds for the first day. And as someone who makes content, that these days are like a very good opportunity, because
Yeah,
it's
I
like
love them. It's super
it's
fun.
it's like, oh, you get to make a bunch of videos and play the new set, and everyone's like really into it, and that part's awesome. And so I played for like 6 hours, which I also don't normally stream for that long. That's just hard for me to do. Like, as you mentioned, having kids means like I have very specific blocks of time where I can do these things. And what I did after spending 6 hours doing that to unwind is I did a cube draft in the evening. So it's like, yeah, I play a ton of Magic, and I'm actually playing more Magic now than I have like in like a decade, which is kind of wild. I'm surprised by that, but that's just kind of how things have kind of ended up. Where I'm back really doing a lot more Magic content than anything else, because um, that's just kind of the where my life has ended up, and I've decided that's what I wanted to be doing right now.
Yeah, actually, I want to talk about that because like it feels like your channel just showed up out of nowhere a few months ago. Because I know I got my YouTube stream just pops up whatever new Magic stuff is coming out. I'm like, oh look, it's an LSV Cube video. I'll click on it, but instead of a Channel Fireball logo, it was like an LSV logo, and I'm like, what the hell is this? What is going on? And the Cube interface was totally different, and suddenly it's a team draft. And I'm like, oh. Oh, did I miss an announcement? What happened? So, how did you decide you wanted to create your own channel? Is it because CFP is not a going interest anymore?
No, no, I'm still working for Channel Fireball. I work for eBay now, and I make
Yeah.
a ton of content for them. It was nothing like that. It was mostly that I wanted to do like a ton of content. Like went from working full time on Storybook Brawl to not, and
Yeah.
and that made it so that I ended up in a spot where I had more time on my hands, and I was like, okay, well, I'm actually pretty interested in just seeing what it's like to make a video every day. That was the goal I set for myself, and I haven't missed a day yet,
It's
which has been
impressive.
kind of crazy.
Like, do you have like I mean, presumably your videos are very well produced and everything. Do you have like an editor or like a team that helps you put these things together?
Yeah, so I do have an editor. This is the same editor that Gabby actually used to use when she was streaming
I
and,
miss
and
those
and making
days.
YouTube content. So that has ended up working out really nicely.
Yeah, like it's very professional, it's very fun, and they do pop up every day, which is for YouTube incredibly important. So, like, I was just like, "Oh crap!" Did like I was just worried that you had gotten so wiped by the crypto problems that you ended up like, "Oh no, I need to go and stream." I'm like, "Well, I better subscribe and like to make sure that
No,
LSV can stay going."
it wasn't that like I needed to do anything. It was just I
You
have a hard
wanted
time
to?
not being busy.
Yeah,
Like
fair.
I almost always have like 2 or 3 projects going at once, just because it goes back to my same need for stimulation.
I
I
have
always
ADHD too. I understand.
yeah, I know. I always have things going because it's
I host 3 podcasts, man. I understand.
yeah, exactly. I like doing stuff, and
Yeah.
that is a big kind of a big part of my personality.
Yeah, and I mean, I think it's great because it's a medium that you excel in, that's really fun to watch, and that's like, gives you something you want to do and enjoy doing. So it kind of works out, which is really nice. Like, I still remember there was a time once you played a game that I couldn't find like a VOD of. It was like a Baral versus Baral brawl match or something like mono blue control, just the most miserable slog of a game that I think took you almost 2 hours to play. And back when Brawl had just come out, and I was like, "Oh my god, dude, this is art to watch and must be just torturous to play."
Oh, I love that kind of game. I was having a great time.
I don't know, it's like it's weird that the games that just kinda stick in my memory. Uh, but I'm curious, like, have there been any games in your career that have just stuck out to you as like, "Man, that was an all-timer, super fun."
I mean, one of the games I keep going back to is the actually the finals of Pro Tour Kyoto against Gabriel Nassif, because it was just this epic game that really could have gone either direction. At various points, I thought I couldn't win, and then I thought I couldn't lose, and then I thought I couldn't win, and then it turned out I couldn't win. But it's the sort of thing that there was a lot riding on that game, and it was just an awesome game. Just even aside from that, and that was really fun. Like I haven't always had gotten to have that experience, and I played so many games that I've had a lot of really memorable and fun ones. Um, Magic is just such the breadth of Magic is just so absurd. Like when
Yeah.
I mean, you play a ton of different kinds of Magic, right? Like
Mhm.
you enjoy different formats. I know you play a ton of Commander, but like you also like to draft, and you
Yeah.
also like following other kinds of Magic. And I don't know how much like you end up playing in terms of constructed, but there is
Historic
just
and standard mainly.
yeah, so there's just a ton of ways to play Magic, and that I think is part of why it's the best game ever made. It's
Exactly.
there's so many things like it contains multitudes. There are so many things that you can do in Magic that are just so fun.
There was a time I met up with David Ochoa because he was living here in Oakland and he wanted to become a bread baker. And I met up with him and his partner at the time, and we were playing mini masters with Innistrad packs. And I was just like, "Ooh, let's open up." And you open up a pack, you put in like 5 of each type of land or whatever, and you just sit and play. And I have never been dismantled by a person so quickly and so thoroughly than when Ochoa just completely like passively ruined my life with one pack of Innistrad. And I'm like, man, when you're playing against the best people in the world, it doesn't matter what deck it is. They'll just like find a way to just obliterate. And
Yeah, I mean, uh, David or Webb, his
yeah,
nickname. Yeah, he's awesome. He's one of
he
my
also
best
makes
friends.
amazing bread.
Yes, he's a I'm not surprised at all that he became a baker. That
Yeah,
it's a funny. You might think it's like a funny place to go from being like a pro Magic player, but he always had that talent in him, and
yeah.
I think it's really cool. That's where he ended
Dude,
up.
yeah, like, we went to his house, and we were sitting there, and we're like, "We're gonna play Magic and also eat this homemade cheese that you made with this homemade bread that you baked." I'm like, "Well, this is literally the greatest day of my life. What can I ask for?" Magic, cheese, and bread. Let's go. Because I know that one of the other things you like to talk about all the time is also one of my favorite things to talk about, which is food, like food and fantasy fiction. And so I'm going to go with food first.
Big fan of
Uh,
both.
yeah, exactly. Right. Like uh, food eating at Magic Fest sucks almost 80% of the time, unless you're in like a big city like Vegas or something like that. But when you're at home and you're hanging out with your buddies and you're like, what would your ideal meal be when you've got your friends coming over to play Cube and you've decided it's going to be a party and you're going to make a big spread for them?
um, Honestly, like I kind of have like a standard meal which I cook when I'm like grilling or making like throwing a barbecue, and that'll be some kind of protein. Like one of the ones I really like making is like kind of like these Korean marinated chicken thighs that end up turning out really nicely. Um, I make like there's like a watermelon feta mint
Mm.
salad that I really like doing. Mac and cheese, of course, is a big part of that, and probably some sangria to go along with it, and then like a cucumber tomato salad also. And
That sounds
so,
like a good
something like
time.
that is one of the typical spreads that I'll do.
I need to come hang out there and remind you that I'm a vegetarian first. Um, oh man, because like I was just thinking, like one of my favorite things to do is just have people come over, eat, and play Magic cards with me, and it's such a delight. Like Magic should like to me because I'm a casual player, kitchen table player. It's just like I just want to hang out with my friends. Magic is the coolest way to do that, and it's so much fun. It doesn't matter what we're playing. We like end up chaos drafting most of the time, but it's just like you just want to hang out and be adults, and it's the best way for adults to find a way to hang out with each other. Like, oh, I'm going to go play cards with my friends. It'll be fine, um, as long as you've got somebody to watch your kids. Uh, yeah, my son is trying to learn how to play Magic now, and he's like, "There's too many words on these cards." I'm like, "Well, we'll work on that."
He's not wrong about that.
Yeah, that's it's a challenge. Have you read any fun fiction yet? Did you get Sanderson's Kickstarter books?
No, I'm so backlogged on books that I haven't done that. It it's the sort of thing where I do look forward to reading those eventually, but right now I don't even honestly I couldn't even tell you what the last fiction book I read was, which is crazy. I just haven't had a chance to read too often. Part of it is I used to read a ton when I was flying places. I don't fly anywhere anymore, so that makes things a little bit trickier to me for me.
That's fair. I have video game years and I have book years, and because of Zelda, this is a video game year, so I've got a stack that's like 4 feet tall of hardbacks that are just waiting for me to turn around and get back to them. Did you watch Wheel of Time?
Yeah, I actually thought the second season was a
So
lot
good.
stronger than the first one.
100%. I mean, the changes that they made in the story are a little chinky sometimes, but I think they
Yeah,
did such a good job with the characters and the actors. It's just like I'm on the
so there's
ride.
like a couple things going on there. One is that like the original Wheel of Time series, which is to be clear, my favorite series of all time. Like it's what
Same.
got me into reading fantasy. I found the book at my high school library. Like it was the sort of thing that was a really big part of where I ended up. But man, that it got a little lost in the sauce. Like I
Robert
think
Jordan desperately needed an editor really
yeah, like I
badly.
think it actually ended better because Brandon Sanderson took over than it would have otherwise because he just
Yeah.
actually ended it. He made things happen.
Yeah, I mean, the thing I always remind people is that Sanderson remembers that the story's only been going for 2 years of real time. So, like, these people don't actually know each other yet, and so it's weird because like, people are like, "Oh my god, can you believe these characters are acting like they don't know each other?" It's like, "Yeah, we've been reading for 20 years in their world. They still have maybe met once or twice ever." And, like, Avienda and Elaine are like or whatever, and it's just like or Min, I think it was, and they're like, "Who are you?" It's like, "Oh, they've never actually met in the story. Weird." Um, yeah, like I get to be a beta reader for Sanderson's Words of Radiance books, the very big door stoppers that he's doing, and man, that guy is one of the most. He's like a lot like you, he's got to be busy all the time, and he needs to be writing a book in between writing a book so that he's got something else to do.
Well,
It's
I
like,
can't even could begin to touch Sanderson's like prolific behavior. Like he is just absurd with how much he writes and what he does.
it's crazy to me because like I was telling him, I'm like, dude, you're like double queuing a draft, except it's novels. It's like you're crazy. Like writing 4 books in a year silently and then putting them out as just Kickstarters because he had them is crazy to me. They're very good books. You should read them when you get the chance. What are you reading now? Are you reading anything?
Yeah, I'm actually reading a book here. I can look up the name. It's a nonfiction book, which is why I couldn't remember the last fiction book. It's called The Social Order of the Underworld. It's actually like about how prison gangs operate in the U.S.
Wild.
Yeah, I just kind of stumbled upon it on Twitter, and it was really interesting. Like, it just talks about how actually most of the large gangs in the U.S. are actually controlled by people who are in prison for a variety of reasons, and it's just been an interesting read, learning more about that. I didn't really,
Yeah, that's not a
I
culture we get a lot of exposure to.
no, so it's been cool, kind of figuring out what's going on with that. But yeah, I think for the most part, I'm kind of a slow reader now. Not as in I don't read slow. I actually read really fast. I just don't spend a lot of time reading, so it takes a while for me to get through something.
Yeah. Like right now, I'm like, I've got time for one show or one book a night, and or like read a chunk of book or watch a TV show, and that's like kind of it because otherwise I have parenting duties and I've got to dealing with a kid, and that means that all your fun time goes away really quick, especially when we're spending all of our time doing magic stuff. Um, have you checked out Ixalan yet? Like, I know you were
Yeah,
looking at some of the previews. It looks sick, doesn't it?
yeah, Exxon looks awesome. I've really enjoyed kind of watching the previews. I think Ixalan is maybe my favorite magic setting. Like it, I don't know why, but I think I find like the kind of jungle temples kind of setting. The
Yeah,
dinosaurs are cool, those are fine. But honestly, just the whole setting I really do like, the like pirates and lost treasure.
pulpy adventure.
Yeah, there's just a lot of stuff going on there that I really do enjoy. So
For me, it feels more like a D&D setting than like Zendikar did. It feels like the type of place that I wanna run a party through and go through the jungles and explore these temples and everything, and it just I don't know, I think it's such a well-developed world. It's
yeah,
and this
one
new
of the things I said on Twitter today was like my favorite D&D campaign that I've ever run, and I always I'm the forever DM.
I
Uh,
know the feeling.
was Tomb of Annihilation, and that's like basically the same setting. Like it's not
Yeah.
significantly different. Like obviously it doesn't have like the whole conquistador angle exactly. But almost everything else is like there's dinosaurs, there's ancient temples, evil
Yeah.
evil gods and stuff like that, and I just really that setting really speaks to me. There's jungle traps. That's part of why I like the card that you were talking about today, the Saw Blade card. That
Yeah,
just
isn't that
it's straight up
cool?
a D&D card. You're totally right.
It's like, dude, it's a trap that you set off and then you break it up and turn it into a car. That's the coolest thing ever. Like, I hope that the rest of the cards like that are themed like that because that'll make that craft mechanic go down a lot easier if the theming is really cool. But I thought, I'm like, damn, this is cool. This is like the sweetest card I've seen. And it's just a simple common. I love that. I think this set is done a fantastic job of capturing flavor. Like their teams have gotten very, very good at resonant design that makes you feel like you're inside this world now. Like Eldraine was awesome. This is awesome. I hope the gameplay lives up to how good the cards look.
Yeah, I mean the first Ixalan's gameplay was just complete crap.
It's
So
one of the worst sets ever, man. I hate it.
which sucks because I actually was really predisposed to like it. I don't know. It just really
It was
just the
just like,
cards didn't work well. Like they weren't fun. Like this is something I actually talk about a lot as a game designer is balance doesn't really matter as much as you think. Like so little matters. What matters is fun. Fun is the thing that matters.
yeah, exactly. Like my favorite way to play is sealed, and Ixalan sealed is garbage. It was just like unplayable because there are just a bunch of different like creature types here, and if they don't work together, you just have an amalgamation of garbage. Good luck. Um, yeah, I have higher hopes for this one at least with their trends. And Ovidio Cartagena is just incredible at creatively directing this set. So I look forward to seeing his impact on it. Like he's a Mayan from Guatemala, and he put in a lot of like his cultural influence into the set. It looks stunning. It's a I don't I mean I don't know if he's Mayan or not, but he grew up speaking a Mayan language, so it makes me think he might be.
Gotcha.
Um, but yeah, man, like, is it wild to see like actual Spanish names and stuff showing up in Magic cards for once?
Yeah, I think it's really cool.
I think it's awesome.
I enjoyed. I grew up speaking Spanish. It was actually my first language, though. I ended up learning English a lot better because going to school here does tend to do that.
Were you born
But
in the States?
yeah, I was born in California, but
Mm.
my dad immigrated from Chile when he was like 18, and my mom actually speaks Spanish, though she is from Minnesota. So
Oh, that's
uh,
awesome.
yeah, and it ended up being a big part of kind of me growing up. So it has been cool, even though uh, it doesn't happen too often in Magic.
Yeah, I mean, do you and Gabby speak in Spanish
Yeah,
periodically? That's
yeah. I
awesome.
mean, she's way more
Like,
fluent than I am. Like
yeah,
I am fluent in Spanish. She is like a
like
native
native
speaker.
speaker.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I know you've gone back to like Ecuador and stuff and seen her family and stuff. That's
Yep.
I don't know. Like as a person who is also a first gen immigration kid here, like I love seeing that sort of thing. It makes me happy to see cultural continuity and just like kids speaking foreign languages because it's fun. It's fun to do that. But trying to play Magic in a foreign language is real hard. Like I tried to
Y-
do it when I lived in Japan, and like my Japanese is good, but it's not Magic playing good. and
Yeah. I have done like some Spanish interviews, and I can certain about Magic specifically, and I can certainly like make myself understood and communicate. But like, there's a lot of just like how two English Magic players talking about Magic would be kind of incomprehensible to a non-Magic player. There's a
right.
lot of slang that goes into it that I don't know because I don't play Magic in Spanish generally.
Yeah, right. Like we don't know the specific vernacular of like I don't know, what do you mean when you say plink something or like yeah, it's complicated and there's no way for us to learn that stuff unless we're in the trenches all the time. Um, where's your favorite place to play Magic been? Or
Um, well, like in terms of where to go, I feel like the luckiest that I've gotten to go to Japan so often because
it's cool.
it's just such a cool place, and it's not somewhere I would have gone really without Magic.
Hmm.
But in terms of actually like the Magic playing experience, San Diego's pretty high on my list because I love San Diego. The weather's always perfect, and it's in California. So, which
It's much easier to get to.
when I was in California, it was very easy to get to, and even from Denver, it's pretty easy to get to.
Hmm. I guess I want to wrap up with asking you, what do you see your involvement with Magic being from here? Is it going to be more content, or are you going to still try to do the pro tours as long as you can?
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to go to the ones that I can go to, which won't necessarily be all of them. I won't even necessarily be qualified for all of them.
Hmm.
Uh, and but it's the sort of thing where I might not go to a pro tour now, which was basically not the case, you know, 5, 6 years ago. It would be very difficult to get me to skip a pro tour. Now it's like, well, if it works out, I'll go. It's more like that.
Mm. Yeah, like going to Chicago in the wintertime, maybe not the most appealing thing in the world, I can imagine.
Oh no, I love Chicago. I don't mind, and I don't mind cold weather. So I'm looking forward to that one. I'm definitely going. But it's more like if my schedule doesn't work out or anything like that.
Sure.
I really love competition. Even before I played Magic, I was,
Oh yeah, we didn't
I
even
mean,
get to talk about fighting games, man.
oh
Like,
yeah, it's true. Yeah, that was my competitive outlet, and um, I don't know. I just even before that, when I played computer games, I always gravitated towards ones where I could compete against someone else. It is just the sort of thing I do enjoy.
yeah. Do you see yourself doing any more commentary?
Yeah, I mean, I'm actually doing commentary for the Ultimate Guard charity tournament in November, and that ought to be fun.
Some of those
Be-
matchups look a little a little lopsided.
yeah, I mean, that's when you get a mix of content
Yeah.
creators, you're going to get a mix of you know people like
It's like,
Kai
oh, it's a
Bood
bunch of Hall
and
of Famers and then a
people
bunch of like
who
people who talk about
have
Commander
have,
on
have, have
TikTok.
never played in a PTQ, but that is the sort of thing that'll happen. I will do some commentary. That one of the biggest things that's kind of kept me from doing too much commentary is that there aren't that many opportunities to
Mm,
not just even do commentary, to compete. And at this point, I would rather compete than do commentary.
that's
So
fair.
it's not that I don't like doing commentary. I've always enjoyed it. And it's just that I've liked competing more. And now I kind of have to choose between. Before there was enough tournaments going on, like you said, there's just tournaments every weekend. There's all these things that I could just do a mix of them, kind of depending on what I wanted to do that weekend, or what sounded more fun. Now it's like, well, there's 5 tournaments, 4 tournaments a year. At that point, I would rather just play in the ones I can play in.
Hmm. That's fair. I mean, that makes a lot more sense too. It's like if you still can play and if you're still qualified to play, go ahead and play, man. Playing is way more fun. Like it's weird because like I don't get to play Magic at Magic Cons because I'm just doing too many contenty things or like, it's hard for me to sit down in the middle and start a commander game without people coming up and wanting to say hi or whatever, which is why I kind of envy you guys at the Pro Tour with that little bar that stops people from jumping in your games. But I mean, I know what I'm there to do. And you I play my games in the hotels afterwards.
Yeah, I think I've never had that be part of like my like that's not the, I guess, kind of content creator I am in the sense, or like
Fair.
I know you've talked about how going to these is like a work trip for you, where you feel like, meeting people and talking to them and doing all that is like a big part of what you're there to do. I'm I'm basically there to play at the tournaments, and outside the tournament, I don't really feel that like I have much, like I don't have to do anything else. Obviously, I
Right.
do some of that stuff, but I don't really feel obliged to do it. So that is a little bit of a different experience, I
Yeah,
think.
I mean, we're different generations of content creators, so it's kind of you still have like the cachet of being able to hang out in the tournament spaces, and you're still in tournament mode. But like, I'm just peripherally there to have fun. But you know what? It doesn't matter. I love that at least we're in the same building now. Like, unlike in Philadelphia where they shoved you guys in a very far, far room from the rest of the con, now it feels like there's more integration. It feels like more of a big happy Magic family, and I just like seeing that. I like seeing people playing all kinds of Magic. It just makes me happy.
Yeah, I remember the first time they had a Grand Prix and a Pro Tour at the same time, and I was like, "Oh well, this is sweet. What this is how they should do." And then it eventually became Magic Fests, and
Yeah.
like it all kind of worked
Like, the
out
first
nicely.
big Vegas thing was so cool.
Very cool.
Yeah, I mean, like, I love that, and I don't know, I'm glad to see at least we're making strides to come back. I'm just glad that we have this chance again. Like, MagicCon's too awesome to not do. Anyways, man, um, I really appreciate you coming on, and I really appreciate all the things you do for the community and for just making content and stuff. Like, I could have asked you a million questions about your life and stuff, but people can listen to Humans of Magic or, like, literally LRR, not LRR, but, like, limited resources every week and
Yeah,
suss
the,
you
the
out.
whole LRR thing, a lot of confusion there.
One day you should go to Canada. Those guys are wonderful. I think you'd have a great time.
Oh, I've hung out with them before. Actually, they did a Christmas special and I narrated it, which was many, many years ago. They just
Oh,
kind of
that's
asked
awesome.
me, "Hey, do you want to do this?" I'm like, "Wow, that sounds sweet. Yeah, of course."
That's rad, man. Well, thank you again so much for joining me. It's special because this is my 200th episode. I've never done 200 of anything in my life except for like
Well, I
work
mean,
or whatever.
I'm sure you know very well that like 70% of doing content is just showing up, is
Yeah,
being the person who puts out the episode every week, and that's always the advice I give people.
yeah,
I've heard Marshall tell people a million times because they're like, I have this great idea for a podcast. And it's like, okay, that's cool. But if you do 4 episodes, then stop, it doesn't matter. Like you're never
right.
gonna, you're not really gonna get anything out of that or like accomplish anything. Well, depending on what your goal is. But if you want to like have this be something that a lot of people enjoy and listen to, then yeah, just showing up is a big part of that. So congrats on hitting 200. That's a big milestone. I
Yeah,
mean,
man.
that's
It's
hard to do.
It's hard to do, and I haven't missed a week in the entire time I've done this. I think there was 1 week that I missed, and otherwise, I've been putting out consistent episodes, and for somebody with, like, ADHD and with, like, problems committing to things, aside from my marriage, which I'm now, like, 20 years into or whatever, this is, like, the one hobby thing that I've managed to put out every week, and I'm, very grateful to, like, all my guests and to you, especially, and all these folks who come on and, like, let me talk to people for magic for fun. Because like, talking about magic is fun, man. It's like I really just enjoy sitting and shooting the BS with people about cards that we love. Um, but thank you so much for joining me. And if folks wanted to find you, I would be very surprised because it's hard to miss you. But where could they go?
I don't know. Magic's going in a lot of different directions. There's a lot of people who play Magic who have never heard of me, and
Isn't that
isn't.
wild to think about?
Yeah, well, I mean, yes, except I never even thought of myself as someone every Magic player should know either. That's not really kind of
Fair.
my vibe. So I've always thought it was cool that folks like what I did, but I also think it's cool that Magic, like I said, it contains multitudes, and there's now a ton of people who just are up into different things, and that
Yeah.
that I think is pretty neat too. But yeah, my Twitter account has links to all the stuff I do, and I'm
Yeah.
LSV on Twitter. So
Very lucky for you to get just a 3-digit name on Twitter and stuff, man. I mean,
Yeah,
L
yeah.
maybe
Lucky, I guess,
LSV is not exactly, like, the
is
most
one way to
common thing
call
in the
it.
world. Not a lot of Scott-Vargases out there.
I being, I guess, an early adopter and knowing someone who worked at Twitter went a long way.
I forgot to ask, so what do you think about the fact that, like, Commander has become so huge comparatively and, like, or, like, even just casual play in general?
I mean, it doesn't surprise me that as Magic has grown and grown, people find a lot of different ways to play the game. I never really saw it as like a zero sum game.
Mm,
Look, people who like this and they like a different thing, and that generally doesn't make any one thing better or worse. I do think that I think that WotC designing cards for Commander can. I don't know. I've seen. I can't speak for people who play Commander, but I've seen people who play Commander wish that that wasn't quite so handed to you. Like I,
yes.
I've definitely seen that. Like, be an opinion that a lot of people have mentioned. When it comes to how it affects other formats, like, yeah, I mean, the more different groups Magic is trying to serve, sometimes you will end up with a slightly different. Hold on a second. The dog is just going nuts. Julie, come here. Um, I do think that designing for Commander can sometimes negatively impact other formats too. I don't think that's like
Like
a
the
big deal, but
initiative.
I think yeah, initiative is part of it, or just like the Faramir and Lord of the Rings that has really awkward wording because it's accommodating multiple players.
Mm,
And I think that sort of stuff just reminds you, like, yeah, Magic has a lot of different people who play the game, and I think that that's totally fine. It just sometimes it's like a very stark reminder that, like, in order to make something better for one group of players, you have to make it, yeah, maybe less desirable for the other, and that does come up from time to time.
yeah, because like, sometimes open up a draft pack, and it'll be like, "Wow, that's an amazing card for my commander deck. However, it's going to do nothing for this draft that I'm currently playing in. Thanks, WotC." Uh, but I mean,
Yeah, I mean, this wasn't about Commander specifically, but
yeah, but just
the
Magic in general, like,
Dominaria United, that
mm,
set had a lot of weird rares that didn't really work because they were uh, they were kind of trying to be like tribal stuff when the tribe wasn't supported. And again, that's not like
yeah,
a
that's
commander
so annoying.
thing, but that's just it's the sort of thing where it's like, oh, this 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 really feels weird here because in limited I opened this like Merfolk Lord. There's no Merfolk in the set. Like
Right,
that
or
felt
the
like a
Elf Lord or
mismatch,
anything.
and that's the sort of thing that I think does take away from the draft experience, which was just kind of weird.
Yeah, like, I mean, I guess we'll see what happens with these new play boosters now that they've got to merge all the streams. So I guess it's gonna be really weird for all of us. I just miss the days when commander cards were the weird 12 drop that was the 25th pick in your draft, and I had to make a deck out of it. Now it's like they're just making cards directly for me, and I would rather they didn't.
Well, yeah, it's funny because it's all like an illusion to begin
Yeah.
with, where it's like obviously when they design a set and they put 7 goblins in the set and a goblin lord, and then they're kind of saying like, hey, this is what the goblin deck looks like, but and ultimately you're always playing with all the cards they designed, and often those cards, like, they had ideas on how they were going to work together, but discovery and agency is still really important, so you want to feel like you're discovering those. Like,
Yeah.
look, when I draft a deck that has some cool combos in it, it's not like I think, wow, Watsy didn't see this, and now I discovered this myself. It's like, well, of course they did put this together, but Commander had so much more of that than like Standard did. For example, like when you build a Merfolk deck in Standard, right, which has happened
Yeah.
sometimes, like they print a bunch of Merfolk, you don't really feel like you discovered that deck because they just put all these Merfolk in the last 4 sets, and so you're
Mhm.
supposed to build a Merfolk deck with them. Commander
Yes.
had so much more of like, hey, I built this commander deck using all these cards from the last 20 years, and I have all these cool combos and synergies that you kind of feel like, pride and ownership
Exactly.
in, right? Like that you and
Yes.
you kind of put that together. It's yours. You get a lot of like satisfaction out of doing that. And then when there's all these like very clearly direct to commander cards that are great in commander, and then these are the cards that actually would be smarter to run, like
I hate that so
they're
much.
more
It's like,
optimized. Yeah, I mean, you just end up in a spot where you kind of feel like that discovery moment was a little bit taken from you. So
that's
eh,
exactly what it is. It's like, when when you're sitting there and you're like, look, I found this perfect rare from Prophecy that does the exact thing I need to combo with this, legend that I got out of Dom United that just happens to work together in a way that's just never been seen before. But like, you feel incredible. Like when you're digging through the bins of the back of the LGS and you find this random dime rare, like common from 30 years ago that's just nobody's thought about, suddenly magical. It feels really good. And then when you realize you sit down at a table and they're like, well, 80% of the cards in my deck WotC handmade to be the best possible card for this slot. Take it, play your Soul Ring, play your Arcane Signets, whatever, go. And I'm like, I
Yeah, I mean,
guess it's where's the. I mean, I don't
it's
want to
kind of,
take fun away from people. People enjoy that sort of thing. Great. There's competitive players who like to play competitive EDH. Good for you. I just like to find crappy cards and make them work.
I mean, like I'm sure there was a lot of people who had a really good time playing Doubling Season, and they're like, "Wow, look at this thing I found!" Because Doubling Season came out quite a bit before a lot of the
Yeah.
Commander cards did, or before Commander really got
Yeah.
huge. And then now they just printed 17 versions of Doubling Season, and it's like, okay, I get it. You figured out a card that people who play Commander like. Did you need to make so many of them?
How many redundant effects of doubling? The fact that Eldraine had 3 redundant doubling seasons on
Yeah,
that sheet, I'm
that
like,
was
bro,
weird.
bro, come on.
Look, at the end of the day, no matter what kind of Magic you enjoy or what kind of Magic player you are, you certainly have thoughts and opinions about how WotC is managing your format. I'll tell you that. And
Look,
and I guess that's the difference. Is Commander used to not be managed at all. It used to just kind of exist. And now it's actively curated and managed, which has a ton of upsides for folks who play Commander. And it has some
as one
I
of the
think
people who does
pretty
that.
reasonable downsides too, right?
Yeah, look, we're trying to keep it more hands off, but WotC is going to do what they want to do, and they're like, look, there's a lot of people playing Commanders, so I'm going to go where the customer is. And from a business standpoint, sure, it makes sense. From a player standpoint, what are you going to do? Anyways,
Yeah,
Magic is still fun. Play whatever's fun, man. Just do the
totally.
thing that makes you happy.
That is exactly the attitude which I think is good to have. I just I guess I wish there were fewer people telling me about what's good for WotC because
Yeah.
I understand business. I understand what's good for WotC. That's not really my where I'm coming from. But
Seriously, it's like, look, I know, I get what you're doing. I wish you didn't, but whatever. I'm gonna sit and play what I'm gonna play, and until then, I'm just gonna keep drafting green cards in Cube. Um, I really wish that you would draft some more green decks. It makes me sad that you always end up drafting like blue, red, or Grixis nonsense or whatever, man. Like, give me
I
some,
dropped a good amount of green deces.
like, give me some
Maybe not
big dumb
as many
creative
as you
nonsense.
would like, but I draft a good amount. I would say.
Anyways, man, thank you so much again. And as always, my friends, you can find me at Gear Reported Gears. You can find this podcast anywhere podcasts are sold, or at Cool Stuff Inc. every Tuesday, or at YouTube every Tuesday. Thank you to my editor, EK. You can also find me on the Shiveman Wheeler Love Magic podcast, where we dig through every set in Magic and talk about them the way two old dudes in LGS would talk about cards, or on my Chronicles of Dragonlance podcast, where me and my friends sit and go through every Dragonlance novel that's ever been published. We just finished Autumn Twilight, and we're moving to Winter Night soon. And thank you for sticking with me for 200 episodes of this show. I really appreciate each and every one of you. And remember, my friends, it's not magic without the gathering, and we will see you next time.